Hi Moonies! Welcome to part 4 of season 2 of my Watch Sailor Moon Learn Japanese series. I'm going to be breaking down 2 short scenes from the first episode of Sailor Moon S, and I'm going to show one word at a time how the Japanese language works and how I translate it. Quick note before I start, this series is intended for intermediate level Japanese learners, so if you're at the very beginning level, some of this might go over your head because I'm going to breeze through the more beginner level grammar bits, but I do have a 45-part series called Japanese for Beginners that goes through all of these beginning level Japanese grammar. It's floating next to my face, it's in the video description, so check that out. Also, in the video description, you will find this entire section of the script in Japanese, Romaji, and my translation. This is true of the other parts of this series as well. Let's get started.
早く現れるがいい。ピュアな心を持つ者よ。
Hayaku arawareru ga ii. So anytime you have this verb ga ii, it's along the lines of go ahead and verb, or you should verb, or yes, yes, verb. It's that sort of feel to it. So hayaku is quickly, arawareru is to appear, so yes, yes, appear quickly is kind of literally what that means. I localize that as just come to me. Oftentimes as a translator, a good tip for translators of Japanese to English, Japanese tends to like its adverbs a little too much, and its adjectives a little too much. So sometimes it's actually a lot better and cleaner if in the translation you remove an adjective or an adverb if it's not entirely super important to what is being said. I didn't feel the quickly part was that important necessarily, so I left it out because come to me just sounds a lot cooler. Pure na kokoro o motsu mono yo. So pure na kokoro, pure heart, wo motsu. So motsu is to have, so have, pure heart. And then mono. So this have pure heart is a descriptor for mono, which in this case, if you look at that kanji, it is not the same mono as thing. It is more as like a person, being. It's not even person specifically, it's more like being. So being which has a pure heart. Yo, this yo is she's addressing the person. It's not the exclamation point. She's not like making a declaration. She's addressing. So, pure na kokoro wo motsu mono yo. Oh, you, oh person, oh being who has a pure heart. That sounds very, very clunky in English, translated literally, so I changed it to my pure-hearted fool. I just took some poetic license. Kaoli Knight, she does think humans are foolish. She thinks anyone with a pure heart is foolish. She's an evil person, so it's consistent with her character.
レイちゃんの言う通りよね。
And meanwhile, we cut back to Usagi, who is lamenting her F on her English test, and she says, "Rei-chan no yu tori yo ne." So anything no yu tori, it's just as blah. So Rei-chan no yu tori, it's just as Rei said. Yone, the yone ending is like, yeah, I know, you know this, and I also know this, and we're sharing this moment together. And in this case, it's Usagi's internal monologue. And I localized that as Rei really is right, though. Like she's admitting, like, yeah, you know, I know, you know, Rei really is right though.
こんなテストの点をマモちゃんが見たら
ひどいなこりゃ
って言うだろうな。
こんなテストの点をマモちゃんが見たら ... So many instances in Japanese, especially in anime scripts, where characters go ... at the end of their sentences, and it's not always the best idea to translate that in English as a ... but in this case it is. こんな this kind of, testo, test, no 10 points score percent. So this kind of score on a test. Mamo-chan ga mitara, so mitara if he sees. Mamo-chan ga mitara, if Mamo-chan were to see this kind of test score, this kind of, in parentheses, bad test score. And I localized that as, if Mamo saw this test, he'd probably say ... And the reason why I translated it that way will become clear in the next line. Hidoi na korea. This is just, they're adding a small tsu and elongating vowels just to emphasize things. In regular Japanese, that's just hidoi na kore wa, not korea, but kore wa. So hidoi, horrible, heinous, terrible, cruel, a bunch of different bad adjectives associated with hidoi. Na is like, gee, like, dang, that's horrible. Kore wa is in reference to her test, basically. So, wow, this is horrible. This is a horrible test. Horrible situation. Wow, what a fix we're in. You could go so many different ways with that. But in the last line, Usagi said, if Mamo saw this test, he'd probably say, and so I translate that as, yikes, that's bad. So if Mamo-chan saw this test, he'd probably say, yikes, that's bad. So it connects, and it does in Japanese as well. And Usagi says, teiyu daro na. So this te is quoting something. So she's quoting, in this case, hitoi na korea, what Mamo-chan said in the last sentence. So te, that thing that he just said, you say, so yeah, he would totally say something like that. This sort of thing flows a lot better with the Japanese word order. If Mamo-chan saw this test, blah-de-blah-de-blah is what he would say. In English, we would say, if Mamo-chan saw this test, he would probably say blah-de-blah-de-blah.
いよいよ天気で
Usako.
Yoyu tenki de. So this is just like super uber polite Japanese. Yoi is like the more literary, more polite version of I. And then o tenki, adding the o to tenki makes it a lot more polite and honorable. So, oh my, what lovely weather we are having today. And Mamo-chan says Usako. A quick side note about Usako, this confused me a lot before I learned Japanese and when I was a Sailor Moon fan in the 90s, and I had no, like, why is he calling her Usako? What is that? So ko is just a very girlish generic suffix for a girl's name. Anytime you want to make any name into a girl's name, just add ko to the end of it, and it's more girly. So changing Usagi to Usako, it makes it more girly. In my view, I kind of think partly why they did this, like in the manga he just calls her Usa, which works totally fine. But like, I need to remind you guys, Usagi is a weird name. Like you would not name your kid Usagi. It's weird. It would be kind of like naming your kid Bunny. It's like, it works kind of as a nickname, but it's just a weird name. It's not really a name. So it would be very unromantic for him to be calling her like, hey, rabbit, rabbit. It's just weird. So he turned it into a more girlish, cute kind of name that's closer to a name. I think that's kind of why they have him call her Usako instead of Usagi or Usa. I think Usa is fine too, personally, though. And she calls him Mamo-chan. A lot of people ask about that, like, well, why is she calling him Chan? Isn't that for kids and babies? A lot of couples, especially the female unit of the couple, will call their male unit of the couple Chan. I have a couple friends who do this. Like, last time I visited them, she was like almost 40 years old, and she still called him Shin-chan rather than his actual name or son or whatever. And yeah, it's just a cutesy little thing that couples can do. It's kind of like pet names. It's kind of like calling each other baby or honey.
いやだからここしばらくはみんなでレイちゃん家に集まってお勉強しようってことになってんのよ
Yeah, だからここはしばらくは. So she's kind of adding all these little words in here. しばらくは is a little more polite way of saying like for a while. So yeah, it's kind of like, you know, like ここは it literally means here, but in this case it means like in this place of our lives, in this place of our timelines. It means that kind of koko rather than like an actual physical location. みんなでレイちゃんんちに集まって. So anytime you have a person's name followed by and then chi, that means that person's house or place. And it gets kind of confusing when that person's name ends in or there's a chan, so then you're kind of missing the but yeah, anytime it's a person's name, chi, or you can use like a pronoun, like I could say watashin chi, that would mean like my house. So yeah, that means Rei-chan's house, Rei-chan's place, shrine, I guess in this case. So minna de, with everyone. Rei-chan chi, Rei-chan's place, ni atsumatte, gather at Rei-chan's place. And I localize that as, yeah, so like, that's why the gang decided that we'd hang out at Rei's. I wanted to kind of put that jumpy sort of feel to it. お勉強しようってことになってんのよ. So this no yo, this is kind of like the desu grammar rule. That's she's explaining something, she's defending herself. And the yo, she's being a little bit more like firm in her explanation. お勉強しよう, お勉強, she's adding the o to 勉強 to make it a little more important. Like, yeah, studying, it's a good thing to do. And this てこと, 勉強しようってこと, so this te, again, we're sort of adding quotation marks to the thing that came before te. So 勉強しよう, let's study, is the thing that's in quotes. てことになる. So something てことになる is becoming the thing that came before me. So becoming, let's study. That's what that literally means, but that's not what that actually means. It's like we have decided that this is going to be a thing now. We have decided that we are all going to gather together at Ray's place and study. That's going to be our new reality. That's going to be our new habit. That's going to be our thing. And I localized that half of the sentence as, and have study sessions for a while. So I moved that shibaraku wa from the first half to the end, the for a while part.
そうした方がいいな。
戦いで勉強がさ、お外になっちゃってたからさ。
And Mamo-chan says, そうした方がいいな. So, so means that way that you were just describing, you the listener, Usagi in this case. So everything that Usagi just said, we've decided we're going to gather at Ray's and study. Shita hoga, I covered this in my Japanese for Beginners series. So, そうした方がいい means like, it's best that you do that, what you just said. And then the na is like, yeah, that's a good idea. 戦いで勉強がさ, so anytime you have this sa, like, let me tell you, yeah, see, it's like this. So, 戦いで勉強が something. So, because of or by means of fighting, basically fighting evil, fighting the wars, fighting against the bad guys. Benkyo, my studying. So because of the fighting, my studying, let me tell you about it. Sa. So this is where I had a little problem. And if I were the official translator for this series and I were working through project managers, this is where I would email my project manager and be like, what is this? This is weird. This doesn't make any sense. Was this a typo? So in the Japanese transcript that I got of this, she says, osoto ni nachchatte. Ta karasa. So it's this osoto thing. There's no kanji either. It's just hiragana. So no idea what's going on there. Osoto means like outside, but osoto ni naru, that makes absolutely no sense. I think she's trying to say osoku or okurechata. I think she's trying to say something like that. And I listened many times to the audio track, but it's old audio. It's a little slurry. It's a little hard to pick out exactly what she's saying here. And also it could have been her just stumbling over her words for all I know. I know what she's saying here. She's saying because of the fighting, we fell behind in our studies, or I fell behind in my studies. That's what I know what she's saying. I know she's saying that, but like it's the exact syllables in there that are tripping me up and confusing me. So if I were the official translator for this, I would have emailed my project manager with that one, and we would have communicated with the studio in Japan, and they would have clarified that for me. But I'm not the official translator of this, so I have to guess. And like I said, through context and what they said at the beginning of this episode, she's saying, well, because of fighting, like we fell behind in our study. And I wound up localizing that as, fighting all that evil made us kind of fall behind in school, you know?
じゃあ寂しいけどデートもお預けだな。
いや、それほどまでにしなくてもいいって。
じゃあ寂しいけどデートもお預けだな。So 寂しいけど, while it would make me feel lonely, though I would miss you, oazuke means you'll need to take a rain check on something, or you'll need to not do something for a while. You'll need to give up something for a while. So deito in this case is the thing that they have to give up for a while, which is dates. Hanging out, really. I mean, they use deito a little more liberally than we would use the word date in the English language. Like, we don't really say, oh, go on dates. I don't know. Some people might. Rich people might say that. It's like most people just hang out if they're in a couple, or if they are dating, they're just, let's hang out. Basically, he's saying, well, even though I will miss you, I guess we'll have to stop hanging out so much for a while. But that's way too many syllables. It wouldn't fit on the screen in that short amount of time, so I had to shorten that thought quite a bit. And it still wound up being kind of long, and I went with, oh man, I guess we should stop going on dates for a while too. And then Usagi stutters, yeah, ma. These are basically filler, like, oh, no, that's not what I meant, those kinds of words. それほどまでにしなくてもいいって. So this te again, coming back, it sort of functions like in English, if you'd say, again, blah 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 blah. It's kind of like you're reminding someone. It's like, I shouldn't have to say this again. The writing is already on the wall. You should have already known this. This is common knowledge. If you end a sentence in te like that. それほどまでにしなくてもいい. You don't need to go that far. So it's like, hey, dude, you know, you don't have to take it that far. So I localized that as, let's not get too crazy here. Because that's kind of like how we would express that sentiment.
ほら、頑張れよ。
ありがとう。
じゃあな。
厳しか。
And then Mamo-chan hands her bag and says, ほら、 Gambareyo. So hora usually means like here or look or come on in some cases. I translate it as chin up. He's like trying to cheer her up a little bit or give her some encouragement. He's not cold-hearted. He's like, hey, I'm doing this because I love you, kind of thing. Gambareyo. So one of my pet peeves is translators translating gambaru or gambatte as like to try hard or to work hard. It does sort of mean that, but what it actually means is to endure. That's what the verb gambarimasu or gambaru means, is to endure something. So he's commanding her to endure it, is like literally what he's saying. But it's his intention here is to encourage her. So I localized that as you've got this. Because usually when we say you've got this, it means like, I acknowledge that you have this struggle that you're working with, but persevere, endure it, and I know that you will be successful. That's what you've got this means. And I think that that's a pretty good expression for gambatte or gambare. And Usagi says reluctantly, arigato. And Momo-chan says jana, like, which means, well, literally means well. It doesn't actually mean goodbye, but it pretty much always means bye, see you later. And then Usagi goes, yeah, kibishika. So this whole like erasing an e from an e adjective or a na from an adjective and replacing it with ka, she's not asking a question. She's not asking, oh, is this strict? It's sort of like a bit of an old way, an old Japanese of saying just that adjective, basically. So again, it's this aspect of Usagi's personality that I think I just missed in when I watched Sailor Moon subtitled before, all those years ago before I knew Japanese. Usagi is just really like kind of melodramatic in a very funny way. And sometimes she'll bust out like this kind of speech pattern. And now the rest of this is Rei having a monologue. So she's doing her fire divination. And she says, Kino no yume wa ittai, ... So this is one of those cases where the ... is erasing a second half of the sentence. So if she were to complete the sentence, it would be something like, Kino no yume wa ittai nan datta no? Like, what in the world was yesterday's dream? But all we're getting from the sentence is yesterday's dream was, ittai usually means, again, by itself it doesn't really mean much of anything. If it's ittai nani, it's like, what in the world? It's like, in the world, but we're missing that what. So this is an instance in which, even though the sentence trails off in Japanese, you don't necessarily want to translate it as an English sentence that trails off, because it just is weird. So I localized that as, what did that dream mean? What did yesterday's dream mean? I don't know. I don't think we really talk like that in natural English. I don't say, what did yesterday's dream, or that dream from yesterday, I might say, but then it gets a little bit wordy, clutters up the screen, and it's not necessarily a lot of time. So I think it's just a lot cleaner to say, what did that dream mean? And this is where she does her little Taoist thing. Rinpyo Tosha Kaiji Netsai Zen. I memorized that before I knew Japanese, and I was so proud of myself. Basically, it's Chinese. Like, all those characters come together to form an actual sort of sentence. I actually just learned that. I was today years old when I found that out. May all those who preside over warriors be my vanguard. That's kind of what it means. There's a few different translations. I'm not a Chinese translator, so don't ask me. That's what it said on Wikipedia. But basically, yeah, it's a Taoist sort of thing, and she's calling upon the magical flame to tell her what her dream meant.
何も感じない。何でもないのかな。27番。
Dameda, nani mo kanjinai. So dameda, it's no use. Nani mo kanjinai. This is basic Japanese. I do not sense anything. So she's done her botched fire reading, and now she's just kind of wondering, nani mo nai no kana? Like, maybe it wasn't anything after all. Maybe my dream was just a dream, basically, is what she's thinking. And then she gets 27, number 27, for her fortune.
嫌なことが起こらず、みんなが幸せに暮らせますように。
Okay, now we have some very poetic Japanese here because she's making a prayer. So, iyana koto, bad things. Iya can mean so many different things, but yeah, bad, just a placeholder. But you could use any synonym of bad. Iyana koto ga okorazu. So this zu ending of a verb. And oftentimes it'll be zu ni. But yeah, the zu ending of a verb basically means nai. It's basically the negative version of that verb. So okorazu means okoranai. Nothing bad happens and something else. And the other half of that sentence is minna ga shiawase ni kurasemasu yo ni. So anytime you end a sentence with a yo ni, it's kind of like a prayer. May, bloody, 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 blah. So if it were just minna ga shiawase ni kurasemasu, that means everyone has the ability to live happily. So shiawase, that also means so many different things. It means happy, but it also means like blissfully, but it also means peacefully, happily ever after, calmly, like you have your perfect ideal life. The ni turns it into an adverb, so happily, prosperously. But because it has the yoni at the end, it is may everyone, minna, be able to live happily, yana koto okorazu, without bad things happening. And since this is a flowery sort of prayer, I localize that as may everyone live in peace and joy, free from conflict. And she's kind of referencing like all that shit that happened in the last 2 seasons when we had to save the world twice and we died and stuff like that. Like, I hope none of that happens anymore and we all can just, sit back on our rocking chairs and just retire, live happily and peacefully. And it's a little unclear of who the minna is in this case. It could be her friends. I think that really is what she means, is her friends, the girls, the gang, the senshi. I don't know that she necessarily means humankind. I mean, she probably does to an extent. I mean, they saved humankind a couple times. So it's a prayer basically, that everything is going to be okay. But everything's not okay.
Mikuji.
So Mikuji comes out. Cool note about the Daimon monsters of the day. They all have, and this is true of other monsters of the day from different seasons, they basically are mutations of actual Japanese words. Mikuji is a fortune that you pull at a shrine. It's basically what Rei was doing just then, like tying it onto the tree. That's a Mikuji. Omikuji, usually you add the O before it, but this monster is Mikuji, so you elongate the ku and the ji. And like most of these daimon, they only say their name, Mikuji. I love them so much. Side note, I want to get together a huge cosplay group of all the monsters of the day from Sailor Moon, so if you're interested, let me know. Will Rei escape Mikuji's clutches? Find out in the well, you won't find out in the very next installment, because I think it takes a while for this whole thing to be resolved. But anyway, come back for part 5 in Watch Sailor Moon Learn Japanese to find out what happens next. And again, if this went all over your head, check out my Japanese for Beginners series. It breaks down the more elementary level Japanese basics.
月の光は愛のメッセージ